How's it going, guys? And it's hello from...
Hi guys, it's hello from Bob and hello from...
me, Ramon.
Indeed, we're back.
Yeah, we are back. And we're back actually on a Friday, aren't we?
We're back on a Friday.
Why is that, Bob?
Well, we're back on a Friday because the idea is more shorter videos, loosely grouped around the subject of vintage guitars.
Absolutely.
And with an intention to publish on Fridays, every 2 Fridays, every fortnight.
Yeah, or it could be every Friday or every other Friday.
Okay, and in the meantime, many of you have very kindly watched the video I stuck up on Monday this week about Tony Berriton's blue guitar, and thank you for all the positive comments. I really, really appreciate it. I don't think I deserve them, which is fantastic.
You deserve them, Bob.
And actually, it made me think another thing, which is kind of what a nice community this channel is, you know, because there's very little argy-bargy and snarkiness here. Mm-hmm. And I should probably cross my fingers when I say that. You know, never say never, but it's just a good atmosphere. And that's your fault as well as our fault.
Yep.
So, thanks for that. Anyway, here we are.
Yep.
Telecasters.
So, we've got 2 Telecasters here. What years are these, Bob?
Well, right old tat we've got in the room today.
Right.
Okay, so I'm holding my 73. 73, as you probably know, is not a great era for Fender or Gibson.
But it's now vintage, you know, 73.
Well, you know,
for all intents and purposes.
I know I'll get into trouble for this straight away, but, you know, for me, vintage is a lot earlier. I don't mind if people call these classic guitars, like you call them classic cars.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, Lamborghini Miura, for example, from the 70s, is a classic car.
Or maybe
it's not vintage.
Or maybe you know, if somebody's younger, then 73.
It's a long time ago.
Exactly.
Absolutely, but for me, vintage defines an era.
Right.
And actually, there's no better example than today. This is what I would call a classic guitar, and it's an unusual guitar. You know, you do get good guitars from the 70s.
Yeah.
Just not as many out of the batch. An awful lot of them are a bit doggy.
And they came with a lot of sort of plasticky finish.
A lot of goop, and the pickups weren't great, and this had F-tuners on, a whole load of junk. I mean, I've mucked around with this guitar a lot, but it's my main gigging guitar. It's probably worth...
What's really interesting is the veneer rosewood is so thin.
It's very thin, but for all I know, in a previous life, this may have been shot through and refretted. I don't know.
I think they are quite thin. I think they are.
I think so. I think so. Of
so
course.
it's almost like you could play, if you played this so much, you'd play through it.
Yeah, almost. It feels like that. It feels like paper. Yeah. But also, these came in both rosewood and maple.
Yeah.
This is a rosewood one. It's a good one. I've done lots of shit to it. I've got a 4-way switch on it, so I've got the pickups in both series and parallel in the middle. It's a nice guitar, and as I say, it's my main gigging guitar. It's utterly reliable, great. But
how much did you buy this for? How much?
1,002. Nothing. It wasn't cheap. The story was that I actually had one in my possession which I lost, and I had to replace it for its owner.
Yeah.
And I liked it so much I went back and bought another one.
So maybe 2-3 grand?
Today?
No, back then.
Back then? No, less. It was a £1,100-1,200.
£1,100-1,200 in 2002.
It was a long time ago. I can't remember how long ago. It was a long time ago. But I mean, now what's it worth? 3.5 tops.
You're right.
You know. Yeah. But you know, by contrast, okay. So I'm sitting here with the 73. You're sitting here with a 52.
So this is like the holy grail. This is like a 1959 Les Paul for Fender, really.
Absolutely.
These have now. I mean, they weren't that expensive maybe 10 years ago. Well, they were. But now they've really shot up, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, they weren't that expensive 10 years ago. They didn't have the same kind of cachet and all the rest of it Sunbursts did, but they've gone crazy now. And they've gone crazy because everyone suddenly realised, like me, that they are unbelievable. Unbelievable guitars. These guitars from the early 50s, the wood was probably 75 or 80 years old before the guitar's made. It's 70 years old now. That's 150-year-old wood for a start. Okay, right. Whereas this is 73, so that's 40 years old, and the wood was probably 2 years old, if you're lucky. right, and it's probably spent the rest of its life
And
drying.
the weight, if just picking up that,
Yeah, this is heavy.
pretty heavy. How many pounds? 8.5?
I don't know. I can weigh it, but
And this is super light.
super light. So the first thing is the wood is amazing, and if you just play just. This has much more resonance about
So
it.
much more projection.
Much more resonance, just as a piece of wood. So the pickup is wound with 43 gauge wire, which is an early Telecaster characteristic, and to my ear, what that does is it gives you all the Telecaster bite and twang, but it gives you more thunk as well.
See, we can.
So for my ear, the 43 gauge wire is a bit more thunk. Now the other thing that's crucial about these guitars is the magnets. Okay, I didn't know this until recently. The magnets in these pickups they're Alnicos, but they're only Alnico 3, and basically you've got a lot of aluminium, you've got a lot of nickel, you've got very little cobalt in an Alnico 3, and that makes the pickup sweeter. By 54, you're getting white guards coming in. I don't really like white guards from 54, 55, 57, 59. Lots of my friends have got them.
So they changed the composition of the.
And I just think that they're like this. They're really sharp.
But they changed the composition of the magnets.
They did. And the magnets, the Alnico 3s, I'm told, it says, they make the guitar sweeter. And certainly my experience is they're sweeter.
So.
So that's on the bridge pickup. So that's a really quite a sharp. The opportunity to be really sharp.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
that was cutting and biting and present.
Yeah. I've rolled the tone of it down.
Not ice pick.
No.
And it had this kind of in the middle. It had this warmth and sweetness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something to do with the pickups. I'm told.
So the neck. Let's have a look at the neck.
Important in early 52, this system here, okay, this was a volume control. This the neck pickup was with a heavy capacitor, so it was really muted. That was
a huge one, wasn't it?
For playing bass.
It was a big one.
Really muffled, okay?
Yeah.
The middle position was the bridge pickup only, and the far position was that this, what you'd know as a tone control, was a blender between the two pickups. Great sound, really interesting, okay? This is later.
Because back in those days, bands didn't own a bass, so they used one of these.
Well, sometimes, yeah.
As a bass.
Yeah, absolutely. Multitask, and of course, also people could earn double union rates.
Yeah.
And all that stuff.
Yeah.
So this one is a much more conventionally wired Fender. So all three positions: neck, middle, and bridge, tone and volume.
Right.
Okay, much more conventional wiring. I was playing a 52 the other day with the blender circuit against this. Guitars sounded really similar, really, but the blender thing does a different. I like both.
Yeah.
I'd be happy with either.
And the Bakelite, nice Bakelite pickguard.
Yes, although that Bakelite pickguard is not right.
Right.
Okay, it's too glossy. But the interesting thing is on the underneath of these pickguards, if you know your stuff, you'll know that there's a 5 or so inch circle.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That is the top of a paint tin on which these scars were sprayed.
Oh, right. Because Glendale, the Repros, actually have the same thing.
Well,
no, not Glendale, Callahan.
okay.
Callahan,
So
they have the same thing.
this may then be one of those, but
Yeah.
the top face of this is not right. Okay, but the underneath, someone's taken the trouble to make it kind of half right.
Yeah, well, Callahan actually do that, so it could be a Callahan.
Could be, but the guard on this is not right. But apart from that, it's
classic.
It's
True.
and also if you run your finger around the edge here, it's going to be all wobbly. That's because these were hand cut with shears.
Right.
Whereas by the time this was made, many years later, these were made obviously by machine.
Yeah, and it is really wobbly. You can really see that, guys. Yeah.
This is hand built,
Yeah.
And as I understand it, the serial numbers between the beginning of Fenders and 54, they went up to about 5,000. But and they're not necessarily completely in order, but they didn't use all 5,000 up. There are probably between 2,500 and 3,000 guitars made in that era.
And tell me about the thickness of this guitar, Bob.
Yeah, it's definitely thin.
It's thinner, is it thinner?
It feels a little bit thinner, just
Right.
a tad thinner. That's one of the reasons why the guitar is so light, but it doesn't hurt the tone.
Right. So again, these were made in the Fender factory by hand, and so sanded by hand. So maybe the guy got a little bit of excited that day. And
maybe. Now this is on the neck and the body. It's got the Taddeo Gomez pencil signatures and so on. But remember that Taddeo Gomez was the workshop supervisor. Okay, so he may or may not have shaped and made this guitar, but he was the supervisor in the room when this guitar was finished.
And these are these called ferrules, aren't they?
Ferrules, yes.
But they're interesting because I think back in the day they did them so they went in a bit more indented.
Right. That's right.
Whereas these ones are not.
Those ones change in the mid-50s. They come out a bit more.
Yeah.
These ones from the 70s, except for that one, one fell out at a gig one day. I broke a string and I lost a ferrule, and so I had to replace it, and it's not right. But
so we got an F stamped obviously on the.
And a serial number, whereas that's blank.
Yeah. So where would the serial number be on
these?
The
bridge pan.
On the bridge. Right. Right.
Oh,
okay. Yes. And we've got a Fender, and it just says Telecaster in speech marks, and it's really nice because it's got this nice checking, hasn't it? I'll do a close up of that, guys. It's got some nice checking.
I mean, it looks and feels like it should for an old guitar. You know?
Yeah. I mean, if people had known how much these were going to cost now, 20 years back, we'd all be buying them, wouldn't we?
We would all have them, yeah. Yeah. And as you know, I'm on the trail of one.
So, another thing, this literally you could do everything on this one. It's kind of like a Les Paul Junior, isn't it? In that sense, isn't it? You know.
I just think it's if somebody had said to you, when Henry Ford introduced the Model T and said, okay, this is going to be the best car.
Yeah.
In 70 years' time, you would have laughed at him, right? But this still, for me, there is no better guitar that's ever been made. There are some that are close to its equals, but no one's ever improved on it.
Well, anyone that knows me, and this goes back 20 years. Anybody that knows me, I always say the same thing to them. I said, no matter what guitars you own, you're going to end up one day with a Telecaster Blackguard.
I think that you're right.
And that's the only guitar you need. And that's been my quote for the last 20 years. Because really, I actually first started on a Squier version of one of the Korean, which is a pretty good guitar actually, and it was a maple neck. And I sold it, and I was thinking one day I'm going to get another one, and I'm going to retire with just this guitar. Because this is literally, guys, all you need.
Well, I live with lots of pretty tasty guitars and stuff, but I can actually imagine a situation where if you put me on a desert island with a really nice little tweed amp and this,
you're sorted, aren't you?
You can make pretty much any noise you want to.
Yeah. So I think that's it, guys. And I think if you are poor and you can't afford one of these 52s, we should help them, shouldn't we?
We should be.
So let's.
It's goodbye from
me, and it's goodbye from
it. See you next time.